Hello, how's everybody today? Today we will be multiplying and dividing radical expressions, and I got really good news for you. Since you've simplified radicals earlier this year, this should not be that much of a problem because you really kind of have this skill from your simplification from what you've done earlier this year. For example, you guys all know if I have square root of 4 times square root of 3, I can write that as square root of 4 times 3, or, oops, or just the square root of 12. And then I can go ahead and simplify that thing to 2 times the square root of 3, right? Okay. So again, basically this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be multiplying square root symbols together or cube root symbols together, as the case may be. Again, since we now know that the index here that's not written is 2, right? 2, okay, from our lesson yesterday. All right. So let's move on and try a few of these. Okay, there's not really much else to say about it. Okay, square root of 3 times the square root of 12, square root of 36. And since our directions say simplify if possible, we're going to go ahead and take the square root of 36, which is 6, and we're done. Okay, we're just going to take principal roots today with this. We're not going to take plus or minus for this. We'll just take the principal roots. Okay, next one here, notice the index is different. 3. In other words, what number times itself 3 times is negative 16? Now, I know that's a real number. I know it's not a real nice number, but it's a real number. Okay, so that's not a problem. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and keep the index the same. We keep indexes the same when we multiply. 16 times 4 is 64. And I get negative 64. And I say to myself, what number times itself 3 times is negative 64? That answer is negative 4. Okay. And the third one, I want you to notice the difference between B and C here, because this is very important. Now, if I'm talking about real numbers, okay, we're not using imaginaries today. If I'm talking about real numbers and real numbers only, the square root of negative 4, we know that that does not exist as far as a real number. So I can't take that number and simply multiply it by this square root of 16 here and say, okay, now I got a real number again. Doesn't work that way. Okay. If you're trying to multiply and at some point in the process you have a non-real number, you just cannot multiply those guys. Okay? Alrighty now. Let's go ahead and simplify the expression here. And again, today we're assuming, there's a little catchphrase in here that says we're assuming all variables are positive. In other words, the stuff we did with the square root, we're not really working so hard on today. Um, I misspoke. The stuff with the absolute value, I should say, that we talked about a little bit yesterday. Okay, so let's see here. Square root of 50. So I'm going to simply, you could actually break these down separately if you think of it this way. So put your x to the fifth over here and your 50 here. And we all know how to simplify the square root of 50. So that breaks up into square root of 25, square root of 2. And I'll just go ahead and keep this square root of x to the fifth over here. Okay. So this is 5 square root of 2 here. And this is the square root of x to the fifth. Well, 5 divided by, what's my index again? Index is 2. So 5 divided by 2 is 2 with a remainder of 1. So this becomes x squared comes out, and I'm stuck with the square root of x underneath. Okay. All right. So now my final answer here is just going to be the 5 is outside, the x squared is outside, and underneath square root 2 times x. So now I'm going to do cube root. Okay. So this is where it gets a little bit trickier as far as the square root of, or the cube root of 54. What number times itself 3 times is 54? There's no number that happens for. But just like what happened up here with the 50, I could say, well, I know 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Okay. And I can break this up into this way. Okay, so that's a little tougher concept. That's a little tougher to do. But again, you should have a list of your cubes there, so you can do this. Okay, so now again for the n, I've got 8 divided by 3 is 2 with 2 left over. Okay, so um, for this line, I'm just going to keep this here. Okay. All right. So for my next line, cube root of 27 is 3. 8 divided by 3 for my n's is 2, so n squared comes out. And what's left under my cube root sign? Let's see this 2 right here. And 8 divided by 3 is 2 with 2 left over. So n squared, or 2/3 of an n, is left underneath the square root sign. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and keep moving along here, just showing you a couple examples. And again, these quick checks, you'll do these in class when you come in. So just go ahead. And again, we're going to assume all variables are positive. So this one, well, we're going to multiply and simplify. So we're going to jam it all together first and then do all that simplification that we just did. Okay. So 25 times 5 is 125. Let's go ahead and take our x's. X to the first, x to the fourth, that's x to the fifth. And y's, 8 and 3 is 11. So now we're back where we started with the previous example, basically. Okay, so the cube root of 125 is 5. X to the fifth divided by 3. 5 divided by 3 is 1, so x comes out, and 2 were left underneath. Okay, 11 divided by 3 is 3, so y to the third comes out, with 2 remainder, so y squared is left underneath. And that's how you do that. So again, we're combining all those rules of exponents that we had before, along with what we learned yesterday about simplifying under a square root. Okay, let's go ahead and move into these guys right here. So if I divide, okay, first thing I have to look at top, bottom, and see cube root of negative 81. Okay, that's maybe not a nice number, but it's definitely a real number. So I'm okay there. So I can go ahead and do this and say 81 divided by 3 is 27. That's perfectly legal. Then I want to say to myself, again, what number times itself 3 times is negative 27? The one and only one response to that is negative 3. And we're done. Okay. This guy down here, we're going to go ahead and start him again with, well, what's 192 divided by 3? Okay, that should be 64. That's a nice number. And x to the 7th, because 8 minus 1 is 7 for my exponents here on the x. Okay, don't change my index. Index is still 3. And now we're ready to rock and roll and simplify. What number times itself 3 times is 64? That would be 4. And then for the exponents, on the x, 7 divided by 3 is 2 with a remainder, so x squared comes out. And what's my remainder? My remainder is 1. So x to the first stays underneath there. You write that exponent or not, you're choosing. Okay? And again, we'll start the quick checks when you come to class. Okay. Last skill for today is to rationalize, basically. Okay. You guys all know how to rationalize. We've done this again this year. So again, my goal is to not have that square root of 5 in my denominator. So square root of 5, square root of 5. Perfectly legal again to do this because I'm multiplying by a form of our buddy 1, right? So we get square root of 15 on top. If I could simplify that, I would. In this case, I can't. And on the bottom, I get 5. Okay. So now we're going to do kind of the same thing with um, variables. So let's go ahead and give ourselves some space here. Okay. So x to the 5th. Let's just leave the top as it is. Actually, let's go ahead and simplify this thing as best we can to start before we even have to rationalize. So 5 over 2, so I've got x to the third to start. That'll help us out a little bit. That'll kind of clean things up. And then on the bottom, I get square root of 3 and y. Okay? So now the last thing I need to do here is, well, multiply by square root of 3 and y, just like what you would have done previously. So square root of 3 y there, square root of 3 y there. So now I get grand total on the top of square root sign is still okay. 3x to the third y over 3y. Okay. Notice the 3's and the y's. One's under a square root sign and one is not in the denominator. So I cannot simplify this top to bottom here or here. Okay, because one is, if you will, locked under a square root sign. Okay? Alrighty. All right, so there's your lesson for today, multiplying and dividing when you have a index of other than 2 is possible, and all those other cases in between. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.